This is today's Bible reading. Transition, the book of Numbers. In the Hebrew Bible, this book is entitled In the Wilderness. The name Numbers comes from the Greek translation of the Old Testament and refers specifically to the census figures given in two census reports. Numbers 1, 2 to 46, and Numbers 26, 2 to 51. The content of the book of Numbers is diverse, moving back and forth between lists and laws and narratives, making it hard to identify any single outline or structure. The book begins in the same vein as Leviticus, with more divine instructions from Mount Sinai, still stressing priestly matters. These laws conclude in chapter 10, and the Israelites set out for the promised land. Israel needed organization in order to reach that land flowing with the milk and honey, and God instructed Moses to take a census, Numbers 1, 2, so that the people would be organized both for travel and for warfare. This first census took place in the second month of the second year of the Exodus, either 1445 or 1274 BC. In that same month and year, Moses and the people departed from Sinai. The census numbers are surprisingly large, and interpreters have often been puzzled by them. For instance, how could 603,550 fighting men be intimidated by the tiny nation of Edom? To answer such questions, many have noted that the Hebrew word for 1,000 is the same as word for clan. Understood that way, the numbers would be considerably lower. The narratives of Numbers 10 through 25 take up where those of Exodus leave off, and in many ways paralleled the accounts of Israel's grumbling against God in Exodus 16:17. Indeed, the people appear even more dissatisfied in Numbers. In the end, God decrees that this complaining generation, including Moses himself, would not enter the promised land. Eating the good foods of Egypt, Numbers 11:5. The fresh fish eaten by the Israelites while in Egypt was a distant memory by the time they were wandering in the wilderness. They could recall other foods that Egypt had offered: cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Now they were unhappy because they had no meat or the special foods they had enjoyed in Egypt. They complained about the lack of variety in their diet. The manna was rather bland, having the flower-like odor of coriander seed. The delightful foods of Egypt are also mentioned in writings of that country. An Egyptian letter from the end of the New Kingdom period, 1550 through 1069 BC, voices a similar bent toward the fruitful bounty at the city of Ramesses. The scribe Paibes writes to his master Amenemopet that upon arriving in Ramesses, he found it a beautiful and pleasant district, full of fish in its ponds, Grassy meadows, abundant dates, melons, leeks, onions, olives, figs, sweet wine, and many other good foods. The Israelites had known the city of Ramesses. It was one of the store cities they had built while slaves. It was also the starting point of their exodus out of Egypt. The ancient Egyptians called the city Per-Ramesses Meri Amun, the name used by the scribe in his letter. The scribes naming Egyptians called the city Per-Ramesses Meri Amun, the name used by the scribe in his letter. The scribe's naming of melons, leeks, onions, along with the several other foods, appears, at the very least, to authenticate the variety of the Israelites' complaint. Like the scribe, they too had witnessed the abundance of Ramesses in Egypt. Transition: Canaan before the conquest. From Kadesh Barnea, the Israelites made their first attempt to penetrate the land of Canaan. Before the arrival of the Israelites, Canaan was divided between dozens of small, relatively independent city-states, each with its own king. After the conquests of the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose I, these Canaanite city-states were officially provinces of Egypt. But as letters from Palestine to Pharaoh Akhenaten show, Egyptian control was not always very firm. Many of the Canaanite peoples were of Amorite descent, like the Israelites themselves. But later migrations had brought all other ethnic groups into the land. Thus, the Bible's frequent lists of the peoples to be conquered: Hittites, Hivites, Horites, Jebusites, Girgashites, Perizzites, etc., Numbers 13:29, reflect a genuine ethnic mix. Nevertheless, the Bible often uses the term Amorite, or sometimes Canaanite, in a general way to refer to all or any of the peoples, nations, or tribes living in Palestine. The city-states within Canaan were established and comparatively strong, while those to the east of the Jordan River were newer and weaker. Thus, it makes sense that Israel established its control first in the east. Long gone but never forgotten, the Nephilim, Numbers 13:33. When the Israelite scouts encountered the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, they reported that they had come across giants. Numbers 13:32-33. In their Hebrew language, they refer to these giants as the Nephilims, the descendants of people who had lived before in flood of Noah. Genesis 6:4. What frightened the spies was the immense size of their enemies. Surely these people must descend from the intermarriage of the sons of God and their human wives. Genesis 6:2. The Israelites had thought that Nephilim existed only during the time before the flood. They did not expect to find them in their own world. The mythologies of the ancient Near East described a time before the Great Flood when things were different. In those days, divinities and humans mated and produced semi-divine, semi-human offspring who possessed superhuman qualities. They were the famous persons of ancient times, of which stories continued to possess superhuman qualities. They were the famous persons of the ancient times, of which stories continued to be told, surviving in the mythologies of Egypt and Mesopotamia. These persons were considered to be stronger and larger than the current populace. See Numbers 13:31. Two of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, argue that Nephilim were not too powerful to fight. Their size and lineage, even if they did come from the ancient deity humans, were not matters to be taken into consideration. Since God had already promised the victory to the Israelites, no matter what the odds, the people unfortunately voted with the other spies, being afraid to fight powerful and perhaps supernatural foes. Sinuhe visits a fertile Palestine, Numbers 16:12-13. The report of the spies to Moses was that the land of Palestine flows with milk and honey. Although the sons of Eliab questioned the truth of this report, the fertility of Palestine was known long before the Israelites arrived. A similar description is found in an Egyptian text of the Middle Kingdom, which covers events from the reigns of two pharaohs, Amenehet I and Sesostris I, 1943 through 1898 BC. The tale of Sinuhe describes the troubles and ordeals in Palestine of an Egyptian official by the name Sinuhe. Sinuhe, according to the text, was a high official in the court of Pharaoh Amenemhet I. During an unstable period of change in power in Egypt, Sinuhe fled to Palestine. The land of Palestine was then called Ritenu in Egyptian texts and was usually thought of as northern Canaan and southern and central Syria. Sinuhe records his many trials and tribulations in the region. On one occasion, Sinuhe settles with a certain Amienshi, called the ruler of Upper Ritenu. The Egyptian official describes the area as having figs and grapes. It had more wine than water. Plentiful was its honey, abundant its olives. Every kind of fruit was on its trees. Barley was there and emmer. Milk was used in every kind of cooking. The Egyptian text is the earliest account of conditions in Palestine during the period of the biblical patriarchs. It appears to accord well with descriptions found in the 5 books of the Pentateuch. Both the tale of Sinuhe and the Pentateuch describe Palestine during this time as fertile but politically unstable and sparsely populated. Transition. Moab on the doorstep of Canaan. The narrative of Numbers concludes with the Israelites once more at Kadesh Barnea, Numbers 21 and 14. The issue now is whether this new generation would believe after their fathers had not. As they prepare to journey from Kadesh toward the plains of Moab, they are ready to hear once more God's command to enter the land of Canaan. The account of Aaron's death on Mount Hor indicates the 40th year after the Exodus, and thus the last year of the wilderness wandering. In the list of Israel's wilderness journeys in chapter 33, Aaron's death is placed in the 5th month of the 40th year after the Israelites' departure from Egypt. Numbers 33, 3, 37, and 38. Calculating by this tradition of Numbers 33, Israel would have reached the plains of Moab either around 1406 BC or around 1235 BC. The plains of Moab are the setting for the Balaam traditions. An Aramaic inscription found in the area east of the Jordan mentions a seer named Balaam. If this is the same Balaam described in Numbers 22 through 24, then he was quite famous, which would explain King Balak's obvious respect for his powers. Numbers 36, 13. A quick cure for snake bite. Numbers 21, 4 through 9. The bronze serpent on a pole that Moses made in the wilderness functioned as a cure for venomous snake bites. Scholars have suggested 3 explanations for what appears to be a type of magical medicine. Each of the 3 many express something about what the people of Israel understand concerning this serpent. One suggestion is that the image of the fiery serpent was merely an object of sympathetic magic. The bronze serpent, representing the actual snake that bit the victim, was presented as a way of removing the poison from the snake bite. Magic amulets or charms for warding off and then curing illnesses and poisons were used everywhere in the ancient Near East. A number of copper and bronze serpent figures have been recovered, showing that the practice was widespread. A second possibility is that the object symbolized God's power over the snakes. The bronze serpent would have been a sort of specialized worship item for those with the snake bites. The glance toward the object would have been a plea or prayer to God for help. The bronze serpent was only an aid to the prayer, while the cure would have come from God. Yet a third suggestion supposes the bronze serpent to have been an intermediary between God and the people. In the ancient Near East, the highest god of a pantheon could create new deities for specific purposes. The Israelites would have understood the bronze serpent as a lesser divine being created expressly to cure their particular kind of snake bites. Among the mythological texts of Ugarit, 13th century BC, is the legend of Keret. In this story, the god El creates the goddess Shatukatu solely to cure King Keret from an illness no other deity could handle. This third understanding possibly explains what happened later as the bronze serpent was incorporated into the Israelite worship of God. It had been created by Moses and had been part of the religious world of Israel and Judah since before the settlement in Canaan. But by the time of Hezekiah, Judahites worshipped it as Nehushtan, possibly considering it a minor deity. The people's devotion to the bronze serpent was condemned by Hezekiah, who had it destroyed. Balaam, prophet for hire. Numbers 22, 5 and 6. Balaam, son of Beor, is the famous prophet of Numbers 22, 24, whose services were requested by Balak, king of Moab. The Israelites were crossing through Moab at the time, and Balak was uncomfortable with such a large group of people in his land. So he called on the prophet to curse the Israelites in the name of God. Normally, a ruler would call on his own professional court prophets for such an undertaking. The blessing or cursing of neighboring kingdoms was a standard duty for a court prophet. In contrast, prophets for hire were generally viewed unfavorably as unscrupulous persons who would say whatever their employer wished to hear. Nevertheless, Balak believed himself to be in sufficient danger to send for a famous and powerful prophet whose work was known for its potency. In the biblical traditions of Numbers 22 through 24, Balaam is presented both favorably and unfavorably. Balaam, intending to keep his contract with Balak, attempted to curse the Israelites, but God kept him from doing so, insisting that Balaam bless them instead. In this way, Balaam was a true prophet even in spite of himself, and so perhaps was worthy of his fame. In a separate tradition, Balaam is held responsible for the Israelite apostasy at Pur and reported to have been killed by Israel. And 8th century BC inscription from Jordan confirms that Balaam was a renowned prophet at the time of Judah's and Israel's monarchies. The text found at Tel Der al-Allah displays a heavenly pantheon and tells how the prophet Balaam was called by the gods in the night through a vision or dream to witness to this divine will. Thus, Balaam's reliability as a prophet was remembered and recorded not only in the Bible, but also by the devotees who inscribed the Tel Der Allah walls. Amen. This is the end of the Bible reading today. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day. God bless you. And see you tomorrow again.